Well, first of all, the East Wing was a beautiful little tiny structure that was built many years ago that was renovated and expanded and disbanded and columns ripped out, and it had nothing to do with the original building. It was a poor, sad sight, and I could have built the ballroom around it, but it would not have been. We're building one of the greatest ballrooms in the world. By the way, zero money spent by the government, zero. The East Wing is being spent by private donors, and it's a $250, $300 million building. It's going to be the most beautiful anywhere in the world.
I've got to say, Willie, I've heard the White House, the People's White House, called many things. I've never heard it described as a sad little house.
It's called a dump in the past, too.
Yeah. I mean, this remarkable historical place just wiped out without a second thought, and of course, so many people who support him, who will support him no matter what he does, don't even stop and think twice about him just completely wiping out American history in that part of the White House. But anyway, let's talk about Veterans Day, Willie, which of course, it's today. And this is a day where we stop and we pause and we remember all of those who stopped and paused their lives and that of their families to give their all for this country. And I know, Willie, you've lived it in recognizing those veterans through the years. And you understand, and so many people understand, that we just owe these vets a debt for all they've done for us. And it's important that we repay that debt, not just in words one day a year, but also in our actions day in and day out, as we remember the things, the values that they fought for, and the sacrifices that they made. That, as Abraham Lincoln once said at the Gettysburg Address, we have to act, we the living, those among us that have seen those vets go off and come back. We have to take increased devotion to that cause for which they gave their last full measure of devotion, and that we here highly resolve that these dead shall not have died in vain, that this nation under God shall have a new birth of freedom, and the government of the people, by the people, and for the people shall not perish from the earth. And yes, it's about the people, not the politicians, not the president, not members of Congress, not the powerful, not the billionaires, not the tech moguls. It's about we, the people. And that's something we have to always keep in mind.
Yeah, I mean, you can stretch back to the Revolution, the Civil War, as you did there, World War II, which has moved so many of us who hear the stories and visit the battlefields. My father, who served in Vietnam, and then those of us who grew up in the post-9/11 generation, thinking about the veterans of the wars of Afghanistan and Iraq. Everything they gave, many of them gave all. Many of them, their lives altered forever by their service. So I think it's incumbent on those of us who have not worn the uniform to respect their service and to make sure they're taken care of when they come back home.
Right.
Something that tends to fade from memory as the wars get farther away, that these men and women who gave so much, Joe, in Iraq and Afghanistan, particularly who are with us here in Vietnam as well, they deserve our praise. They deserve us talking about them on this Veterans Day, but they also deserve us and our government remembering them and taking care of them and fulfilling the needs they have. They signed a contract when they put on those packs after 9/11 and the towers were on fire to go fight the war, that we'd take care of them when we got home, and we have to live up to that.
Well, yeah, I saw too many times in the past promises made to our men and women in uniform, and promises not kept by the government that sent them there. And that's something that we definitely have to do. And I think it's also very important because of this generation we're in. You're talking about the post-9/11 generation. It's just too easy for Americans to look at wars and say World War I, World War II, the good wars, Korea, Vietnam, the bad wars, Iraq, the bad wars. Mike Barnacle, I remember talking to Richard Engel on the 20th of the Iraq invasion, And Richard, who'd been, for good reason, highly skeptical of what went on over there, sat there, and behind him there were a table of students, and he said they've been debating the invasion and whether we are better off, we Iraqis are better off today than we were 20 years ago. And he said, that's a debate that could not have happened 20 years ago. And he got choked up at one point, probably remembering all the sacrifice he saw from our vets. So even when our vets leave a war that may not be seen as the most successful or may have been seen as a strategic mistake going into that war, often they create a space that creates the possibility of a better future, even in places like Iraq. So it's so important that they don't think that they went over there and they fought and they saw their buddies give their lives in vain, or families believe that. There are people living in Iraq who are living a better life now, even when our government made a terrible mistake starting that war, that those people living a better life because of what Americans did. It's certainly not always the case, but there was, I guarantee you, man for man, woman for woman, there was much heroism and valor in Iraq as there was in any other battle.
You know, Joe, I think one of the elements of Veterans Day, and it ought to be an element of every single day, is for more Americans to realize the meanings of the words service and sacrifice. When you serve the United States in uniform, no matter where it is around the world, you bring America to people who are unfamiliar with the reality of America. This country is free. We are based in freedom. The roots of our country are based in revolution and in freedom and in independence. And we bring that gift and have brought that gift to many countries throughout the world across the years. If you take the time, just a brief period of time, to read about the wars that we have been involved in, especially World War II, we brought more to Europe and the world than anything you could think of. We brought freedom. We brought liberty. We brought release from a Holocaust. We brought release from the grip of a strangler, a man who was strangling the word democracy and government, Adolf Hitler. We brought so much, and it remains after we leave. We have had some nightmares. We have had Vietnam. We have had Iraq and Afghanistan. We have had a horrendous withdrawal from Afghanistan. But the spirit of America, the spirit of the sacrifice and the service of so many Americans who go to these countries, who wear our uniform, who go because they're asked to go and told to go, and they follow orders, that spirit, that sense of service and sacrifice is eternal.
We're going to continue to honor America's veterans over the course of this Veterans Day morning. We'll also have two guests from Operation Mend, an incredible organization that is, in fact, taking care of our post-9/11 veterans. With us this morning, the co-host of our fourth hour, staff writer at The Atlantic, Jonathan Lemire, contributing writer for The Atlantic and an MSNBC political analyst, Eugene Robinson, staff writer at The Atlantic, Frank Foer, Washington bureau chief at USA Today, Susan Page, and the host of Way Too Early, MSNBC senior Capitol Hill reporter Ali Vitale. It's an Atlantic kind of morning, it feels
Staff
like,
meeting.
doesn't it? Yeah, staff meeting.
What am I going to join?
Well, so submit a writing sample and we'll start talking about it.
Keep your resume on file, Mike. All right, a lot to talk about with the staff of The Atlantic because today marks day 42 of the government shutdown. But last night, the Senate did pass a bill to reopen the government. The legislation approved with the support of 52 Republicans, 7 Democrats, and 1 independent. It combines 3 full-year spending bills with a stopgap measure to keep the rest of the government funded through the end of January. It also reverses mass layoffs triggered by the Trump administration during the shutdown and blocks additional firings. But it does not extend health care subsidies. And last night, Speaker Mike Johnson told reporters he cannot guarantee that he will hold a vote on a bill if the Senate passes.
Look, we're going to do in the House what we always do, and that is a deliberative process. I mean, we're going to find consensus on whatever whatever the proposal is.
But will you bring it to the floor for a vote
As
and
you
let
know,
it fall if it
as
doesn't
you
have the
know,
votes?
as you know, I do not guarantee the outcome of legislation or dates or deadlines or anything. I have to, wait a minute, I got to build consensus among the members, and that is what we will do.
But it's not
exactly as we have always done, exactly as I always do.
But it's not guaranteeing an outcome. It's guaranteeing a vote.
I can't guarantee that.
So the bill to reopen the government now heads over to the House, which has been out of session for more than 50 days at this point. A source tells MSNBC Speaker Johnson is aiming to clear the legislation Wednesday. So, Joe, we'll get into this in a moment. Democrats are not happy with the 7 plus Angus King who voted to get this bill across the finish line. They have their qualms with it, and we'll explain that in just a minute. But what's your sense of where things go from here?
Well, the speaker there is talking about his deliberative process, and I think most of us would agree he has been quite deliberative when it has come to the Epstein files. He has been quite deliberative when it has come to swearing in a new member of Congress who was elected, over a month ago? Yeah. He has been quite deliberative. I will say, Gene Robinson, though, there's a little problem here. He doesn't have a massive majority in the House of Representatives. Yeah. He's got at least, I think, a dozen Republicans that won in seats where Joe Biden won. If you look at the extraordinary political bleeding that Republicans suffered last Tuesday in Virginia, in rural parts of Virginia, where they are feeling the cuts that are coming, whether it's to food assistance or whether it's coming to whether they can take their child to a medical facility 10 miles from their home, or if they have to drive 65, 70 miles from their home. You can see, and those Republicans in those Biden swing districts can see, these the trend lines do not look good, with Republicans, again, saying no to helping people out, whether it's with food assistance or helping Americans out when it comes to paying for skyrocketing costs for their health care. So you add those 12 and you put MTG in there and a couple of other people who represent rural districts who are saying to Republicans, you all are sealing your own political fate. I don't think it's going to be as cut and dry as the speaker thinks it's going to be. I've been in Newt Gingrich's house where there's a majority of 4 or 5. It ain't a pretty sight for the speaker when things go sideways.
Yeah, and with this Republican caucus in the House, things can go sideways pretty fast. You're absolutely right. Every single county in Virginia moved toward the Democrats last week. Every single one. The most rural counties, the most Republican counties, the most MAGA counties, they all moved toward the Democrats, some very substantially. And I think that is about the affordability issue. I think the question of the Obamacare subsidies, one thing the Democrats did do is they made that an issue. It wasn't an issue that had grabbed the public before. Now it's real, and they did make it an issue. So if if those who voted for the quote compromise end quote, which was actually caving, wanted to defend themselves, that's one thing they could say, that we made this an issue, and it is a very bad issue for Republicans in the coming midterms.
Yeah, and Mike Barnicle, you look again at the election results if you want to see where the wind's blowing. There's some counties, I read, I think it was York County in Virginia, but there's some counties that had not gone Democratic since LBJ. And it was it's one of those nights that, again, I saw this in '93 when everything broke Republican, these states and these counties, and people said a tidal wave's coming next year. Now, I'm not suggesting a tidal wave for Democrats will be coming next year in the midterm elections, but let's just say the forecast, if you look back at the past, the forecast not looking good for them. And a lot of them, if they're smart enough, They're going to hunker down, and they're going to make sure they protect their working Americans in their district. They're going to protect their hospitals in their district. They're going to protect their nursing homes in their districts. They're going to do what they can to help their constituents, if they're smart, with skyrocketing health care costs. They can't be seen on the wrong side of that issue. They can't be seen on the wrong side of affordability. They can't run around saying what Donald Trump said last night, that the affordability crisis is a hoax. It won't work. This isn't about masks. This isn't about Neil Armstrong walking on a soundstage in Burbank. This isn't about some Bobby Kennedy Jr. Conspiracy theory. This is something that Americans are living every single day of their life when they go to the grocery store, when they go to the gas station, when they go to their doctor.
That's it. You just put your finger on it, Joe. I mean, you go to gas up your car and you look and you think, oh, I'm only going to get $20 of gas today because I can't afford to fill the tank. You go to the grocery store and you know that prices have gone up.
Rent to meet, bills to pay, car and mortgage payments. And I'm grateful for all you have done to keep the Senate running. And for all that you do every day, shutdown or no shutdown, to serve the Senate and to serve our country. And with that, after 6 excruciating weeks, I will stop talking and let all of you get some rest.
And they have been excruciating. That was Senate Majority Leader John Thune late last night, thanking federal employees of the upper chamber, as well as Capitol Police, who have all worked without pay during this government shutdown. It came after the Senate passed a short-term spending bill to reopen the government. And the question now is, how will the House respond and how quickly? Meanwhile, the end of the shutdown doesn't necessarily mean air travel is going to return to normal in the near future. The question is, how long will it take to get things back on track? Also ahead, we'll dig into the growing calls from House Democrats for Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer to step down from his leadership position. The question is, are Schumer's colleagues in the Senate still supportive of him? It's way too early for this. Good morning and welcome to Way Too Early, the show that thanks the many veterans for their service. I'm Ali Vitale on this Tuesday, November 11th. We'll start with the news. Today marks day 42 of the government shutdown, but last night, some hope and progress. The Senate passed a bill to reopen the government, taking steps toward ending this longest shutdown in U.S. history. The legislation was approved with the support of 52 Republicans, 7 Democrats, and 1 independent. Combines 3-year full spending bills with a stopgap measure to keep the rest of the government funded through the end of January. The package also reverses mass layoffs triggered by the Trump administration during the shutdown and blocks additional firings. The measure now heads to the House, which has called its members back, finally, to Washington so they can vote on the package after being out of session for more than 50 days. A source tells MSNBC that Speaker Mike Johnson told House Republicans Monday he's aiming to clear the legislation Wednesday night, more likely. While House passage isn't guaranteed, Republicans, if they vote all together, can advance the legislation without Democratic support, sending it then to President Trump's desk to be signed into law. The agreement sparked backlash from some Democratic lawmakers immediately, as it lacks an extension of Affordable Care Act subsidies that are set to expire later this year. And frankly, that's what this whole thing was about for Democrats. Last night, Speaker Johnson told reporters he couldn't guarantee that he would have a vote on an ACA bill should the Senate actually pass one mid-December, then send it over to the House.
Look, we're going to do in the House what we always do, and that is a deliberative process. I mean, we're going to find consensus on whatever their proposal is. So
But will you bring it to the floor for a vote?
As
and
you
let
know,
it fall if it doesn't have the votes?
As you know, I do not guarantee the outcome of legislation or dates or deadlines or anything. I have to, wait a minute, I got to build consensus among the members, and that is what we will do.
But it's
exactly as we have always done, exactly as I always do.
But it's not guaranteeing an outcome, it's guaranteeing a vote.
I can't guarantee it.
And that's exactly it. It's not guaranteeing an outcome. It's just guaranteeing you'll have a vote. But Senate Majority Leader John Thune remained optimistic, seemingly, saying yesterday that there's a high level of interest among his Senate Republicans on addressing these ACA subsidies.
Well, there are people who have a high level of interest in it, and so we're trying to incorporate members who are very interested in solving the issue. We've got some who have a lot of expertise in healthcare. So there are a number of them that have already started to work on some things, and there are already some discussions going on with folks on the other side of the aisle about what might be a path forward. We'll see where it lands. I don't know the answer. I just know both sides believe that we've got to do something about the affordability of healthcare in this country.
Joining me now, congressional reporter for Semaphore, Eleanor Mueller. You and I were both having conversations with folks yesterday about what an ACA deal might ultimately look like. But we'll take that second, because first they've got to actually end the shutdown. The Senate clearing their job yesterday, getting out of town as fast as I've ever seen those folks move. What now happens in the House? I mean, they've got travel woes to worry about on top of figuring out, can Republicans just do this all on their own?
Yep. So they noticed a vote as soon as 4 p.m. tomorrow. There's a chance it could slip to Thursday, depending on how well members can travel back to D.C.
Yeah.
We've seen signals in the last 24 hours from key Republicans, key Democrats, that indicate they have enough support to pass this. You know, the Freedom Caucus put out a memo yesterday calling this a big win, telling their members to talk about it like a big win. And then certain moderates like Jared Golden posted statements signaling that they will likely vote for this. And so it seems Johnson has the votes. He said he has the votes. And now it's just a matter of getting them all back into town to actually do the thing.
Yeah, and of course, Jared Golden, the lone Democrat who voted for this many, many weeks ago when the House first passed that continuing resolution. Since then, he has announced he's retiring from politics, not seeking re-election for his very embattled seat in Maine. So that's an important piece of the equation. But I think the larger conversation that was happening in the Senate yesterday, you and I were in briefings on this until late in the afternoon, is the idea of, okay, Democrats grappling with, what did we do this all for, right? Because there's no hard and fast, tangible win on health care. And then, of course, you've got Senator Jeanne Shaheen and others who were central to putting this deal together saying, yeah, but we're going to get to control the floor. We're going to get to write the bill on the ACA. Does compromise look like it's possible in a building that really has shown an inability to compromise unless they're absolutely forced to after 40 some odd days?
It seems it's possible. You know, even the Democrats in the House and in the Senate who voted against this thing in the Senate have said they're going to vote against it in the House, have said they see the value of being able to control the narrative for a month, picking a bill that will make their Republican colleagues as uncomfortable as possible in terms of forcing them to maybe actually do some of the things they've said they'd be open to doing over the course of this shutdown. Whether or not they can negotiate a viable bipartisan product by December, I think, is the question. There's been senators who have told us they don't think that's within the realm of possibility. And certainly, I think the math is more difficult in the House than it is in the Senate. You know, I think there's a more ingrained distrust of Obamacare as a concept, a bigger unwillingness to be on record supporting even, you know, a tweaked version of it. Yeah. And so we'll just have to see where they come out.
Yeah, I thought it was interesting yesterday. You and I were part of a small group of reporters talking to Senator Jeanne Shaheen, and even in her conversation, she's a longtime leader on ACA subsidy legislation. She was saying, well, we've got to introduce caps. We've got to go after waste, fraud, and abuse. Things that Republicans, including John Thune, have said to me that he wants to see in any kind of reformed ACA package. So I think you're right. The dynamics in the Senate maybe something, but you're right, I think, too, as you read the House. Though, who knows? There are Democrats in vulnerable seats who see upside to actually passing this kinds of legislation. Same thing on the Republican side. Maybe that means that something gets done, but I don't know. I think, again, this is why Democrats are so angry about the fact that they're questioning what they did the last 40 some odd days for, if not to get a tangible something on the health care issue.
Absolutely.
You know, the other piece of this, too, is that House Speaker Mike Johnson says that bringing the House back means he will finally swear in Arizona Democrat Adelita Grijalva. Johnson told Republicans on a private call yesterday that swearing in Grijalva will be his first order of business once the House reconvenes. Grijalva, who was elected in September, has accused Johnson of abusing his power by delaying her oath, leaving more than 800,000 of her Arizona constituents without representation for 7 weeks. She's also accused the Speaker of delaying her swearing in because she's expected to provide the final signature in the release of records related to Jeffrey Epstein. Grijalva expected to take office before tomorrow's spending bill vote. This all, I think, comes back to where we were in the summer, which is House leadership trying to get the Epstein files out of the spotlight Ro Khanna and Thomas Massie say, but wait, we're going to do a discharge petition, which ensures that this is going to take a really long time. And now here we are in November. Yes, the government shutdown has sucked up all the oxygen, but we're about to pivot right back to talking about this Epstein discharge petition, right? I mean, track the future path of this. Once she's the 218th vote, what does House Republican leadership do?
So she'll be the last vote they need to actually force a vote on mandating the release of all of the Justice Department's Epstein's files on the House floor. That's something Johnson said he will not do. He said that certain victims, not the ones we've seen on the Hill, have come to him, raised concerns about information within those files that could be damaging. That's the reason he's given for not wanting to have that vote until now. With Grijalva sworn in, he has to have it. There are ways for House Republican leaders to change the rules so that this discharge petition does not force a vote. Johnson has signaled privately, publicly that he is not going to do that. Now is the ultimate test. You know, is he going to stand by that, or is he going to allow a vote on this to proceed, putting his members on record again on forcing the Trump administration to release these files and not just the ones that they pick and choose to release?
Yeah, and I think that that's a really important piece because Johnson has regularly said, okay, but the Oversight Committee is doing an investigation into this. That's his preferred method of transparency around Epstein. But if the goal is just transparency, what's one more? Right?
Exactly. And so, of course, I mean, as you mentioned before we came on air, it's unclear where this bill might go in the Senate. And Congressman Massie, I've talked to him about the possibility of Johnson changing the rules to thwart this discharge petition. He said, even then, we would have some sort of vote that would put Republicans on record, and that's what they're looking for, right? It's not necessarily this getting enacted and actually taking effect. It's just simply telling Republicans that they have to publicly say, yes, I think the release is a good idea. No, I do not.
Yeah, I think that's really so key, especially given, let's say the House does have a vote, it would likely pass. It then puts a hot potato in the Senate where I think, again, the dynamics are unlikely to see that pass. But again, it puts people in a really awkward political position, given the fact that President Trump wants to talk about anything else, despite the fact that for years he was saying there should be transparency on this very issue. Congressional reporter for Semaphore, Eleanor Mueller, thank you. I will see you on the Hill for another long day. The government shutdown, of course, may soon end, but the travel disruptions created in its wake are likely to continue. Yesterday, on the heels of the worst day for air travel since the start of the shutdown, nearly 9,000 flights were delayed. More than 2,000 were canceled. That's according to the tracking site FlightAware. And it may get worse before it gets better. The FAA will continue to restrict flights at some of the country's busiest airports, citing staffing shortages and increased pressure among air traffic controllers, many of whom have taken on second jobs after working for weeks without pay. Flight cuts are expected to increase by 10% by the end of this week. President Trump took to social media yesterday to demand all air traffic controllers get back to work, saying he'll dock pay for those who don't and reward others who took no time off with a bonus of $10,000. He then doubled down on those comments last night in an interview with Fox.
We should not have had people leaving their jobs. And what I basically did is say the ones that stayed, of which there were a lot of them, I'm sending them a $10,000 bonus.
Where's that money coming from?
I don't know. I'll get it from someplace. I always get the money from someplace regardless. It doesn't matter.
When can we expect the flights to resume more or less on better schedules?
Well, you know, I've heard a lot of people say, in fact, on your show 2 nights ago, somebody said, you know, I just took a plane. I got better service than I got in the past. Now, maybe because a little bit fewer people are traveling.
There are a lot of delays now, sir.
But a lot of people, but a lot of people are getting through. I think the people are going to start showing up. I was very strong on that truth. I said, now you get to work.
So I don't know where the money's going to come from, but I'll find it from the same administration that said they couldn't use a contingency fund to pay SNAP benefits for people hungry during an ongoing government shutdown. It's notable. Still ahead, President Trump warns of dire consequences.